Is that how it goes when you're out for like a week? You have to do the intro.
Yeah, I was gone for vacation, and then you made me do the intro. So you're up. Welcome, and then I'll introduce our guest.
But I was sick this morning. I don't. Okay. Hey everybody, welcome to The Future is Virtual. I'm Dekker. This is Chadwick.
What's up?
I am back from an incredible week. Sorry that I missed all of you last week. I apologize for leaving you only in Chadwick's less than capable hands.
What?
Oh no!
I'm right here.
Oh, he's right there. No, we were doing some cool stuff last week. We're out at Scare Los Angeles, the LA Convention Center. We brought, I think, 10 or 12,000 people through an augmented reality experience. Very, very cool stuff. So sorry that I missed you guys, but you have another opportunity to check it out if you're in LA. All through October, it's going to be at Arcade in downtown LA, and it's going to be in San Diego at the end of the month.
I didn't know it's going to be placed at Arcade.
Yeah,
That's really cool.
yeah, all through Halloween.
Ooh, okay. So downtown LA, check it out at Arcade. Today, our special guest, Francesca. Why don't you say a little bit about your full name where people can find you? But for my background and what I understand of yourself, it's you are working at UCLA, pursuing a PhD, and you have worked in kind of the museum space, and you're kind of the intersection of curation and museums meets immersive media and how they kind of can marry each other in a compelling way.
Yeah. So I'm Francesca Albrezzi. Hey, everyone out there. You can find me at on Twitter at FAlbrezzi, ALBREZZI.
That is a spellable one.
Yeah. That's a you gotta spell it out. It's the Italian. Two Z's like pizza, right? So yeah, and I've been working for a little over a decade in museums, and about six years ago, I started working at the Getty Research Institute in the Department of Digital Art History.
Is that up at the Getty itself?
It's up at the Getty
pretty.
itself, yeah. Beautiful space to work, gotta say. Got a little spoiled.
So they owned the Getty Villa and lived there. Did they ever live in that one, or has that just always been a museum?
No, that was actually little known fact. The guy who owns Moraga Winery, or used to own Moraga Winery, which is just off of Sepulveda.
You're not allowed to mention any conflicting sponsors.
We only support Mickey's.
That's right.
Liqueur.
Boone's Farm is cashing the checks over here.
What was it called? Mad Cat? There was like one called like MD40. Remember that one? All right.
He owned that land and sold it to the Gettys.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah. So
okay.
they built the space up there.
And they built it for a museum, though. That was the purpose.
They
of
built it for these various campuses because it actually houses the Research Institute, the museum, the Conservation Institute, and the foundation, which were all actually spread out across Los Angeles for years. And that's where they
What do you research
hub.
there? Like, what is the research?
So when I was there, I was working in the Department of Digital Art History, which was a newly kind of minted department, and it was very small. It was me and one other person, the director, and she started it because she realized after starting the Getty Vocabularies program, which has to do with controlled vocabulary as a way of indexing and searching things and creating standards for art and architecture, and the source for geographic names, so that when people are creating their databases, they're using authority files for their metadata.
Yeah, you guys basically determine the lexicon for art.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. And so her next project was, how do we get scholars to work in new ways and be more collaborative? Because art historians, this discipline is one in which you get the St. Augustine syndrome, right? Where people just want to sit in their little cubicles and, look in special collections and find the document or the piece of work that they think is the most special thing in the entire world and squirrel away and write the book about it and then come out and tell the four people in the world that care about it.
Is that an industry term, the St. Augustine syndrome?
It is a little bit of a coined phrase. Yeah. Martha Baca.
What's it reference to? St. Augustine, I'm a neophyte. Dekker's probably shaking his head going like, Chadwick.
He was when he was a monk, he was cloistered. He wrote a lot of illuminated texts and that sort of thing.
That's why Dekker is my foundation of knowledge. When we're not on the podcast, he gets texts from me and be like, what is life?
I just grew up very close to St. Augustine, Florida. They have a museum about him.
Oh, there you go.
That's convenient.
Yeah, no, I had too much Catholic school growing up, so
okay.
The big thing there is that these scholars we were noticing were still they're visiting scholars that would come and do research at the institute and use the special collections would start photocopying books and things and putting giant packages together to mail themselves, things back wherever they were in the world. They didn't know how to make a PDF. They didn't know how to, create a website with what they were doing. So we saw our job as, how do we first at least get these kind of basic digital knowledge to these folks? And then once that was that ground was laid, we said, what's next? How do we use open source software? How do we create more collaboration in the discipline and kind of break down these long-standing
So you
barriers?
trained the St. Augustines of your industry on how to potentially use technology to better categorize and not basically build an archaic system that no one could use?
Exactly.
Oh, cool.
Exactly.
Sweet.
And, annotation software. This is something, annotation has been a long standing thing. Writing, in the margins, not new for scholarship, right? But we're seeing people still do it in an old-fashioned way where they could be doing it, and saving it along and sending it to people using OneNote, using the Getty Scholars Workspace now, which has a light table and you can drag and drop and share your comparisons with other scholars, and that's what we wanted to encourage.
And if anybody at home also has the mental image of St. Augustine like opening up a tiny little MacBook Air and getting his mind blown with his long beard and his
There you
robes.
go.
You're my spirit animal. Please comment and
Please make that meme. Make it now.
That's a T-shirt right there. Yeah. Okay. That's very interesting.
Send it to
So that makes sense about your whole. So you did that. You started that 10 years ago, roughly, right? That was kind of.
So working at the Getty, I started about 6 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've always been in this intersection of training. Are your colleagues kind of up to speed now for the most part? Obviously, there's always some people stuck in their way saying, "Don't touch my process." But
well, our first project was on this manuscript, and we were trying to solicit scholars to work on it, and we actually had one scholar turn it down because she said, "This doesn't help me with tenureship. This, won't help me in review, and no one's going to know. I'm not getting paid for this, so it doesn't help my career. I can't sign up for it." Now that's a different story, right? The digital humanities have been around for maybe over a decade, but disciplines are starting to understand that when it comes to academics and review, they have to be open to this kind of form of scholarship.
digital humanities, that's what it's called.
Yes.
And that is not just the organizational systems, but rather just humanity unto itself in a digital form. What can you describe that? I'm a neophyte when it comes to all this stuff.
Yeah.
I went to business school, which I strongly advise people to reconsider if that's
well, that
your
would
path.
explain why you don't know the academic term, the humanities.
Yeah, I'm like, so wait a minute. You're telling me my general elective classes actually had a full degree behind them? Okay, will you explain a little bit more about the digital humanities? I know what a humanity is, Dekker. Don't maybe crawl over this table.
Well, so digital humanities is the intersection of humanistic study, right, which is more qualitative study, with the digital or the computational, which is more quantitative. And what happens when you bring those two things together is this really, really interesting tension that causes us to do really deep reflection on our scholarship. So this field started maybe 10, 20 years ago, maybe longer actually. Those have
You'll
been
always
around for a long
find someone
time.
in like the 1920s. It's like, what we need
I was
is
doing this.
this
yeah.
abacus will one day be digital, and they're like, eh.
I know the big conference, which is just wrapping up right now in Montreal.
What's it called?
The DH conference.
Oh, dope.
Yeah, I think.
Is it just called the DH conference, so you have to know what it means?
I think it's either DH or Digital Humanities
Cool.
Conference, something like that. But it's in Montreal right now, and it's grown from a very, very small conference of like 40, 50 people to, massive amounts of people, like the College Art Association, where you just take over a hotel and, you got thousands of scholars.
So as an example of this, like going fast forward to today with
Sure.
virtual reality, you're taking all these CAD files and looking at buildings, etc.
Yeah.
Could you, now it's qualitative if a building is pretty, right, or most visited or considered important, but then you could quantify potential features that are similar between the two, and that potentially could cause some sort of tension? Because I don't know if you've seen them, but in Pasadena there's a company called Virtualytics, which takes
something as, well, it's both text and it's marginalia, and it's not part of the full thing, but it's kind of part of the full thing. So those are the things that when you're dealing with real objects, life is messy, right? It doesn't fit into a database very cleanly. And how do you expose when those things come up? You know, differences of opinions. How do you, if someone used a term about, you know, a certain sculpture, and then they used a different term in a different part of the manuscript, how do you connect those two things in a markup sense so it's findable and searchable and shareable?
So how does this translate? So why don't you give a little background as to what you're doing in virtual reality now?
Yeah.
And how does this, now that I have a background as to what you exactly do, how it translates? Like, what are you doing?
So with 360, I'm capturing performances in exhibition spaces. So that allows me to look at both the audience reception as well as the performance as well as the work on the walls. And I think that's a new way of trying to preserve an event for a museum space. And then for exhibitions themselves, using panoramic images through Pano 2 VR to annotate the various different aspects of the exhibition and sharing that with somebody so that they can actually get that experience, whether they're able to come to Los Angeles and see, you know, the LA 1992 exhibit down at the California African American Museum, or they can hop online and click through this tour and see all this information and get big blown up stills of or video of the things that are there in the exhibition.
From an academic standpoint, are you starting to see institutions becoming aware of who they're placing where in the audience to archive it most appropriately? Like, well, this is a serious question because we had this problem over, you know, we've done a lot of work at record labels, and when we go and shoot concerts, it's like, oh wait, no, hold on, we want these other people in the front row. We don't want, oh, but they paid. We'll move them to a different comparable place because we want them to look this certain way and we want them to react this certain way. So we start planting people in. In
terms of documentation, I haven't experienced that yet, but I'm sure that will be something of who's come to see the show, right? If that's one of the things that you're documenting. What does that say about your institution? You have to be hyper aware.
Right.
It's probably beneficial to them too on the demographic side. You guys are potentially selling, I mean, do you guys ever consider that you're selling a product? Because you are. I mean, for a music video, you're selling a product. I did something for.
How dare you belittle what I do?
It's art. It's art, damn you! For $14.99, and then I did something for an MCN where the crew was picking their nose in the video, so we had to wait till like he stopped, and then I had to figure out the content because you could just turn around and this guy was digging for gold.
Oh man!
Where do you guys draw the line on like you're filming, but you potentially don't care if what the crowd is because that's authentic?
So in the cases of capturing performance, yeah, that's authentic. You want to be able to see the reception as it's happening in real time. So for example, I was at a gallery space and I was playing around with a touchscreen iPad tool that they had, and I was holding my camera and futzing with it and figuring it out. And when I watched the footage later, there's a guy staring at me constantly, like not paying attention to his conversation, just side-eyeing me like every 3 seconds. And I had no idea that was going on. It was happening behind me.
Yeah.
But that's something that's interesting to know about the space and how people are navigating the space, what's going on in the space.
Well, what's that physical property? Like if you stare at something, it innately changes the object.
The observer principle?
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, Dekker's my foundation again.
There
So that effect, I mean, unless the camera can be invisible. The orb from Labyrinth. But that wasn't invisible.
But think if we had this technology, you know, 100, 200 years ago, I mean, we would be able to know so much. We would be able to actually see which European aristocrats were like, you know, eyeballing the ballerinas that they were going to pay for later. I mean, it would have been fascinating.
But
absolutely.
Well, no, and it was looking at, when I say looking at me, I mean, I'm sure he was trying to figure out what the heck I had in my hand.
Oh, for
Oh
sure.
no, that was not directly. related
That's
to
what
you
it
as a
was. That's
comment.
what it was
No.
assumed. Yeah.
And frankly, when I bring it into museum spaces, if I set it up and leave the room, that's the most interesting thing, is that people don't know, is this an art object? Is this part of the exhibition? What's going on here? The reception is part of what I am interested in, is how are we integrating this technology into society, and what are people's like just gut reactions?
Are you guys
to
building
it?
like a Corbis database of all this content that is available to anybody, or is it like, well, we're going to build this up and figure out what it means later?
The 360 content?
Yeah, where does it live today, and can others access it in a more, I don't want to say commercial sense. Of course, Chadwick always goes there, but like, if there's content, do you guys?
I didn't say it, dude.
Yeah, you thought it though. It's the inside joke.
That's why I love you, though.
It's always like, well, how do we make money on this, Dekker?
Hey, money is not a bad thing, right? Yeah.
There it is. Humanities. See?
We need it in the arts, right? Please, Trump, don't
That's
take away
right.
our funding.
Do you call it STEAM too? I call it STEAM. Hockaday in Dallas taught me that at some event like 3 years ago, and the people that still call it STEM, I go, no, STEAM, add art to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is that what the humanities call it?
We do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good.
I think STEAM. Well,
There it
STEAM
is.
is different than STEM,
Uh-huh.
but I would go with STEAM.
Isn't it like the same though? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math.
Math. Yeah.
Got it.
Because we should be in there too.
That's right. Well, it's, music makes your brain bigger, right?
Exactly.
I didn't take band.
Well, the only thing I know about it is from that Google manifesto the other day.
Oh, we brought it up.
That's the only thing
found
that
a
I
way
know
in.
about
There we go.
STEM.
You did so.
We were trying to avoid it, but
To catch you up again, it's
Right.
this guy in the too long don't read version of it basically said the primary reason that men have a bigger position in technology companies
or greater representation or whatever you
is
want to call it.
inherently biological, right? I mean, that was just the guts of it. I'm sure that he made some sort of like acquiescence of like,
Look,
of course
I mean,
it's
history does not look kindly on those types of views. I mean, just look at let's ask Nikki the Greek. Do you remember that sports broadcaster who got into a world of trouble?
Are there any
back in
follow-up
the-
questions if I say yes?
What's that?
Then I do not.
You do not.
No. I always got to, if there's follow-up.
No, he was
like an idiot.
he was part of the he was a big believer in that that wave of thought that came out around the time that they published the Bell Curve, if you remember that, about breaking down intelligence by racial categories and things like that. And Nikki the Greek got into a lot of trouble because during a sporting event, somebody asked him about the high amount of black players, and he sat there and goes, "Oh yeah, well it's obvious because back when they were slaves, we used to breed them for their strength and this and that and the other thing." And so it's one of these things where it's a surface level argument that makes sense to people who don't really want to go deeper into things or why things are the way they are and tear things apart scientifically and actually read. It's one of these kind of like just general gloss over type of things, and they defend it by saying, because it's science. And it's not. It's just a really ridiculous hypothesis. And the same thing with this guy who wrote the manifesto. It's not really based on anything that is proven in a substantial or significant way.
It's institutional.
Yeah.
Basically, it stems from institutional powers. And
Yeah. I mean, it's.
Well, causation and correlation, right? It's like there aren't that many women in tech because X, Y, and Z. It's also it's because of their perpetuation, like you just said, of a system that doesn't allow for that amount of representation. So you can't use that as a basis for your argument. Well, it's always been that way, so obviously it's
Or I also
foundation.
I hate how it'd always be Susan, CEO of YouTube, so it's solved. Racism's done because Barack Obama was black. It's like, no, that's progress, but it's by no means we're done.
Right, but the follow up that he's been going on conservative radio and everything. The follow
That's
up,
right.
The follow up to this is that apparently he is considering suing Google under the statutes that protect an individual who is trying to organize a union. So he's saying that he was trying to create greater representation for the people that think like,
Okay, so first off,
ham-fisted
let me tell you
morons.
a backstory on someone that there were 5 big companies, right?
white men are so oppressed.
I know. Well,
white men are the real minority in this country.
the Justice Department's doing that whole thing with the schools, right? That we've been oppressed with our admissions policies when it's like sub 10% of any minorities really at these major institutions are. So like that means the inverse is tens of percent is that demographic. But because we're not doing a completely even playing field, it's just like, you know, people want to create, they want to forget the past and make it seem as if it doesn't matter. But things happened that, yes, we're not in your control. But if we have a 7 billion human population that's going to 10, we have to build some rules to try to fix things that our ancestors did. And we're going to have stuff to deal with, from climate change to racial progress to female progress. But if we don't just say like, hey, nothing's perfect, but these are good decisions that our forebears made to try to fix a wrong. Don't go on the individual level and go, well, but I didn't get in because of it. It's like, I get it. I understand the argument that these individuals have, where it's like, I have not been given the chance to go to Harvard because of a certain quota system. But separate yourself. I know it's tough to say that. I'm out of school. I'm not trying for a spot at Harvard, but separate yourself and maybe look at the intrinsic overall picture here, where these programs were put in place because of atrocities and things that have been institutionalized.
But I mean, at a certain point also, that's language. If you go in there and you say, I was denied a spot at Harvard because they had this many things,
sure.
That's like when I submit to a film festival and I don't get in, and they send me that nice letter and it says, we had over 20,000 participants this week.
Sure.
I'm like, see, if they hadn't had those 4 categories that were special, see what it's not really the reason you didn't get into Harvard.
This is
mean,
why
let's be real.
I see what you do as fascinating, because currently you're kind of documenting it on a very specific level.
Mm-hmm.
Performances, museums, probably, you know, you mentioned buildings and CAD files, etc.
Yes.
But for folks like me that have been filming 360 for a while, Dekker and our network of hundreds of people that we know that have filmed it, you effectively, because I had the same experiences in when I would travel to Europe, and I'd put a 360 camera down in like 2014.
Yeah.
Some would look at it and be investigated, and then they'd move on with their life, and then there'd be like 20 minutes maybe. I took some long shots where the batteries would die. And I just captured a moment in time in this city that right now is probably kind of boring, because it's like 2-3 years ago. Not much has changed in Amsterdam. I'm sure the Starbucks maybe is now a Baskin Robbins, like big deal, or whatever, a falafel house, or stroopwafels. But maybe 30 years from now, that piece of content will be inherently valuable. You don't, with this North Korea stuff that's going on, you don't know what city's going to be around in the next 10 years.
Well, probably Los Angeles will be, because we don't have a strategic Pacific Command here. They'd be smarter to target San Francisco or San Diego or Hawaii.
Long Beach, maybe.
But
Maybe. I mean, let's not even. God, just give me a bunker.
I want to talk more about demographics.
Gabe, how safe is this building? Are we like, this is like a bunker building?
I don't have a mic in front of me, but I was reading about nuclear preparedness. And
yeah.
Since we're on the 2nd floor, we're pretty much good. We would just have to go into the kind of lobby area to be further.
Gabe, we don't have a bathroom key to the men's room though, so I think we're dead. Okay. Well, let's fix this.
Right.
Okay.
Duck and cover, everybody.
That's right.
But speaking more about demographics, though, right?
Yeah.
So you're recording these experiences in institutional spaces, spaces that may have a filter already to them, because
absolutely.
How much of your work is going to be potentially focusing on public art and the people that would be seeing public art and examining the demographics of those people?
That's a great question. I actually haven't done any work with public art yet. Being out in the field, I think, would be a great place for this kind of technology, to see who's actually experiencing these works and benefiting from them. Right now, the 360 annotated tours are in empty spaces, right? So the idea is you clear everybody out and you document the work that was done. But I think going back to what Chadwick was talking about with this this way of documenting, right, and then building an archive, right? How is this technology going to affect the way that we archive history, and how is that going to affect cultural memory? I think those are the big questions that are facing this discipline now in museum studies now. And the problem has always been that, look, there was an article that came out just a little while ago that talked about is this going to be the lost digital generation, right? Who actually has something to play a floppy disk? What about all those documents? If they weren't printed out, is that just going to be lost information, lost work?
So people like me are going to be your saviors, because my wife is always upset every time I move a job. I take all my technology, wrap it up,
Yeah.
and put it. My garage is just filled with 5.5,
There you
3.25. But like, remember zip disks?
Yeah.
I don't have a zip disk reader.
And that's part of what archives have to, that's part of what their responsibility is in preserving this kind of information, is that they have to also have the readers. And that is always the conundrum, right? How quickly is this? We think it's going to, take our preservation to the next level, and yet, what are we still going to be missing? And if I clear out the space and document it and just do the work, what about the bodies, right? What about the people that are actually meant to come in? And I believe it'll give people greater access. If we put it up online and share it that way, people can have those more immersive experiences with that space. But then there's the tracking kind of question of who is actually going to go on that website and experience that tour.
And let's also, for the audience at home who's playing along with us, let's break down everything that you need to have to see a film that was produced this year that never had a physical 35mm print 1,000 years in the future. Let's really think about this, okay? So an archaeologist, comes across what's called a DLP, a DCP, which is like it's a Unix formatted hard drive that they use at these projection houses, right? They come across it. What do you need for that? You need to have electricity in the same way that we use electricity right now. You need to have alternating current at a certain frequency. You need to have microprocessor architecture very similar to what we have, which is an insane thing to think that would evolve along a parallel path, right? You would need the operating system written to whatever the most current version to run that DCP is. You would then need the DCP de-encryptor software that runs on that operating system. You would then need a display that uses an HDMI cable or whatever other attachment that you're going to use to display the thing. So when you start unpacking this, it's an insane task to think about how people are going to experience our cultural relevancy.
I used to do the Fox DCP stuff for like Alvin and the Chipmunks shipwreck. The other layer is the encryption key. So let's say you found it all, put it all together. Well, maybe it was Bob.
I don't want some stinking dirty pirate in the 27th century stealing my movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's lost. Those they are heavily protected. Yeah, it's almost like the analog is easier because if I have celluloid and a light source.
There was a fascinating. This is going to be so far left field. I'm using this because Chadwick loves Batman.
I love Batman.
Yeah,
very good.
There is a cartoon. It was on TV like 10 years ago. It was called The Batman. And there was an episode of it that just made me grin from ear to ear because it was about some future archaeologists uncovered the Bat Cave, and there's some kind of a world, eliminating threat that Batman might have held the key to knowing how to defeat them or whatever, and Batman had the forethought to, around the entire Bat Cave, etch the binary code that they could recompile by scanning the entire Batcave over and over, so they would run a program where Batman tells them how to fight the aliens. I'm like, that's great. Good for you, Batman.
Oh man.
So what is your next?
He thinks of everything.
Batman does think of everything. I'm glad you snuck that in there.
But this relates to the exhibition that I have up right now at UCLA's YRL Special Collections. On the George P. Johnson collection, it's a Negro Film Archive that we took two quarters to pull out kind of the original documentation around the Lincoln Motion Picture Company. So this was one of the first race film companies founded in the U.S.
What year?
1917, I believe.
Wow.
Cool. Very early 1900s, and this is an archive that was made by a gentleman who was actually like the first black postal clerk in the U.S., and his brother was actor Noble Johnson, and became pretty well known And so he started this motion picture company and hired his brother to do distribution because as a postal clerk, he knew the distribution networks and everything was done by train back then. But this is an archive that wouldn't exist had it not been for George P. Johnson's forethought that this is an important history that isn't going to be collected by anybody else and that he had the duty to protect and preserve. And I think that that's the thing with this technology, right? We're all out there with cameras documenting what we think is important to us, but what are the things that we're not documenting? What communities are we serving or not serving? And how are we going to collect this for archives and preservation in the future? I think we have to be really, really aware of that when we go into it.
So are you thinking of actually doing an outreach campaign? Because there's a lot of Thetas out there, there's a lot of Gear 360s, a lot of garbage content.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people with a tripod, they hit record, and it just lives on their hard drive.
Yeah.
But would you guys be willing to have, I mean, the legal agreements like, hey, you can upload it here, just so you know, this goes into the archive, we can do whatever the heck we want with it. We'll try not to commercialize it, but hey, we have to make money too. Is that part of the plan?
So right now for the 3D model archive that's going on at UCLA, it does have to have kind of a very minimal institutional verification, right? It has to be a scholarly project. But I think community-based archives are becoming a really important part of the collection process and the preservation process. And so, yeah, I would be really interested in creating a community archive, but I think that YouTube 360 is kind of doing that in a way already, right?
Yeah.
As long as that sticks around, but how do we move a big company's thing like that to a museum one day? How do we move YouTube 360 into the Smithsonian?
It's a partnership. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk to, Susan or someone at the highest ilk and go, hey, we've identified these 1,000. Is it possible that we could potentially reach out to your user base and ask them for permission to... Because the concern you have, it's actually what happened with MySpace. I used to have a really cool video of me singing and dancing at Six Flags. And the only place that existed was MySpace. And I went back one day after like 6 years.
Was it really cool though, Chadwick? Because you
Yeah.
used the word really cool.
No, it was really cool.
Okay.
So what would happen
I
is
trust
we
you.
pretended we were janitors, and then out of nowhere, Mr. Eppenbeck would get on the loudspeaker and go, get back to work! And then I get really mad. And then I'd sing a J-Lo song, Let's Get Loud, and pull my speaker out of my garbage can, and then do a 15-minute show on the hour, every hour, for 5 hours.
That's awesome.
Wow.
That is cool.
The video's gone. It's gone. Poof, because MySpace crashed and burned.
Right.
So YouTube's going nowhere, but, the back-end infrastructure for these... So you don't know what's going to happen. The next phase of warfare, we just saw with the election, with the fake news and all that.
Right.
The next phase of this might just be delete all the data. Imagine if all of the banking data went poof.
Well,
What do you do?
that's how ISIS has been attacking, people. It's how do you eliminate a people? You take away their history. You
I
take
almost
away
feel
their,
like
their cultural identity.
You guys might actually become part of the forefront of... So you've seen the Obama stuff and the Putin stuff where they have enough facial recognition where they can then recreate the person and it looks hyper-realistic.
We talked about that, I think, 3 or 4 shows ago. So if you guys go to thefuturesvirtual.com, you can check out the Scott Kilburn episode.
That was a great episode. I listened in on that one. That was one of the ones I was gone for. But you guys almost have to be able to say, look, we have so much data. We can verify the authenticity of this. But you need to aggregate all of this as soon as possible and make some sort of algorithmic decisions that are quicker than we expect to identify this is fake. The timing of this explosion, or the lip movement is wrong, or the fact that we know the schedule of the president and he was traveling that day and this was not him. Because we're going to be facing a crisis of epic proportions, because currently there's a huge swath of folks that believe fake news and it's text-based.
Right.
With some Photoshop. Like, I'm dangerous at Photoshop. I can do some funny stuff. But like these guys are doing some crazy lighting compositions and using After Effects to create explosions that look real, but then physicists come on and go, no, that's not how it works.
Right.
But that's not enough. So how do I get you on the front? I need somebody, because we've ranted about this before.
Yeah.
But the 1930s, the FDR fireside chats,
Right.
1960 Nixon Kennedy television debate. So you start seeing this technology progression, right?
Yeah.
2012, Obama with Shepard Fairey, like beautiful use of social media, blah, and then Trump with the celebrity of social media.
Exactly.
The 2020 election, I think everybody in this room, Gabe included, believes that AR and VR is going to hit by that point. Like, it'll hit. Not necessarily everybody has implants, but Apple Glass, Google Glass, pull out of my pocket. So that means campaign posters, campaign videos, news will be consumed in some sort of immersive fashion.
Right.
I can trick you. I know how. With this guy to my left, Dekker, if I had, here's $50,000, Dekker, create this fake experience that is hyper-realistic and convinces you of something that is completely not true. And I give it to somebody at a mall, at a museum, they would be convinced because they saw it, they looked around it, and they experienced it. What do we do from your perspective, someone from the humanities, to fix that? Because a lot of people aren't reading. A lot of people get their news source from Fox.
Right.
And I just don't know what to do.
So this is actually, I was just speaking with a professor at Occidental yesterday, and this was one of the things that she mentioned with her students, is that her close looking exercise that she would do with them, where she would give them an image and say, you know, spend some time with this image. I think it was a Giotto, right? Like very early Italian Renaissance. Spend some time with it, look closely, analyze it, and write an essay on what you see. And a lot of the responses that she was getting back in this assignment were students going, well, you know, there's red, so that means anger, and, you know, they weren't spending time with the image because we're bombarded with images so much these days. And it's such a quick digest, right, that people don't know how to spend time looking closely and investigating. And so my suggestion to her was, okay, how do we get students focused on looking? How do we get them to think about, what are you actually doing? What are you consuming? And how are you consuming it? So taking that exercise and comparing it with a real physical experience in a museum compared to going on the Smithsonian's 3DX Project website and looking at a really, really high-res 3D movable model of an art piece, and then comparing your experiences with each one. I think we need to challenge people to become more reflective of what they're doing and how they're consuming. And so I think, yeah, for me, I think immersive video is something that it's called the empathy machine for a reason, right? It can sway votes on the UN for refugees. Vice versa, it can dull our senses to the point where, you know, we've been in it. There was I'm going to forget the name of it now, but there was a TV series where a woman was brought out of cryostasis. So you're the woman paralyzed, and you can look around, and you can't talk, but you can respond.
Defrost?
Yeah, defrost. That was it.
Shout out. We had Tana on.
Yeah, defrost. And then that affects your body, you know, where if you watch them back to back, they were saying people weren't actually able to, they had to like relearn how to move if you watch them back to back. So these things have an intense effect on us physically. And that's something that we have to be cognizant of when we're preserving and when we're sharing and, you know, encouraging our culture to pick up these tools and use them. We have to be responsible about it.
Our culture can only be as analytical as is advantageous. So we also have to make it, you know, an imperative that people want to find out the truth. Did you guys ever see a documentary from Orson Welles called F is for Fake? Have you ever seen this?
Are there any follow-up questions?
It's from the 70s.
I'm just going to keep asking that. No, I did not. I like Orson Welles, though.
It's an interesting dissection of a very famous art forger who Welles had befriended, and he kind of went around to his other friends who were art dealers and things of that nature, and what they were discussing was the nature of forgery through the lens of collections and collectors and museums. And if there's not a vested interest in verifying the forgery, if it's advantageous for a certain collection to know that they have a certain number of pieces by an artist, then it's not going to be as scrutinized. Conversely, there's part of the documentary that talks about Picasso, I believe, refusing to verify some of the artwork that was actually his own artwork, because he just didn't feel strongly about it and didn't think it was the best representation of his work. But it was his own work, and he was adamant that they were forgeries. Right? So there's you have to.
This is art history, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is history. Humans are fallible and messy, and life is messy, and I think that's why the technology isn't going to be the solve, right?
Right.
But it's also it's not our savior. It's not our downfall. It's something that we engage with, and we have to be responsible about the way that we engage with it.
So, do you watch Black Mirror?
I do.
Okay. Like, the technology we're talking about reminds me of so many of the episodes, but one of the craziest ones is where they superimpose, like, bugs on people when they're a military dude.
Yeah.
Like, things like that where you can almost superimpose on the present and change the present to accommodate your goals.
Right.
That's my concern when it comes to, because, like, the paper of record, the Times, the Post are currently being attacked, and I have to defend it. I was speaking with someone recently about climate change, and I was trying to be, I was like, okay, I'm going to engage this. Usually I'm like, you know what?
I think I was there for this. I walked away from this.
You did. Dekker walked away, and I was like, you know what?
I'm out. I tapped out.
Yeah, I was like, it's my time, and I was like, I'm in California, so like, I'll convince him. And I remember saying, well, I believe in the Times, I believe in the Post, and then the response was, like, that's fake news. Have you ever listened to, like, the Turtle Creek Report?
And I Chicken
Right?
Little Report.
Chicken Little Report. I'm sorry. I remember in my head I heard the Charlie Brown teacher go, bullshit. And I just went, whoa, we're at that level? Like, if you read the Times, people that say the Times is nuts, and, like, the editorial, they can quote that and think it's the Times. But, like, if you read a Times report, it is the driest data I've ever read. And it's important. It's like, President Trump landed at 6:15, and he said this, quote, blah, 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 blah. He is attending this at this, and this is what's going on, and North Korea said this, blah, 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 blah. And that's it. And I'm like,
I don't know if we
this-
need that big rundown of your liberal agenda right here.
All right.
Where the president landed at what time?
Whatever,
You're just
I'm
trying
saying
to
it's
fool
right.
me.
Oh, yeah, that's right. That's right. I gotcha journalism.
Yeah.
And I get concerned. So I don't know in your industry, because it seems separate, but it's actually, you guys are going to be at a head with the journalism world, and you already are, probably have a Venn diagram. Who is if the Times is my news source, how will they validate? Do they go through folks like you to validate 360 content? Because you're going to be the experts on it? Like, how do we marry you guys so I'm out watching garbage one day and I think it's real, but it's not? Protect us.
I think we're in an age where the cultural authorities of our time are less and less respected, and less trusted. I think we're becoming much more of a hive-minded society, but you know, we have Trump in the White House for a reason, right? They took civics out of schools for a reason. There's a level of, if people are not aware of where the best place to go is to find the most factual information, they will make it up. They will figure it out on their own.
Have you ever listened to Alex Jones?
I have not.
It's funny because about 10 minutes in, you're like, oh, that's the monetization model. It's like, and you need my kettlebell monkey pack.
What is a kettlebell?
I don't know.
No,
It's
I mean,
like
but
allegedly.
Again, the dude who listens to almost nothing but conservative radio. I'm going to tell you, I listen to Mark Levin, who is the worst human being on the face of the earth. Yeah, I'm calling him out. He really is. I sit there and I think to myself, when we do this show, I sit and I go, oh, God, I can never be one of those radio guys who has a regular, because he goes on there, his followers call him the great one. It's same as Alex Jones. They pump themselves up.
Sure.
They have a very cultish
It's
sort
the
of
charisma. It's the
and the way that they sell it. Mark Levin is on there. He does this program that is ostensibly free. It's sponsored, but you don't have to pay to consume it. But then he goes, if you want to go deeper with the issues, get your subscription to Levin TV. It's only for real patriots. It's only for this.
Yeah.
And they are brainwashed day in and day out. They are bombarded by this propaganda that they need to spend additional money with these cultish
To
figures
support the cause.
To support the cause.
Yeah.
And the cause always is, liberalism is a disease. These people are sick. They're destroying our country. They're coming after you and your children. It's all based on fear. There was an article about Pat Robertson. I can't remember where it was published. It might have been
preacher?
Mother Jones. Yeah, the preacher. where somebody who used to work for his organization when they were starting the 700 Club shared this hierarchy of fundraising that Pat Robertson had come up with, and it was always like service to self, service to family. I mean, anything that you can make somebody afraid of in this hierarchy is going to guarantee that you're going to make a certain amount of money percentage-wise for the amount of people that you canvass. Right? It's like the biggest fear is your own personal safety, then the safety of your family.
So it's the
then
Maslow's
country.
hierarchy of human needs, and they basically say, we're going to take away your food and shelter, or this
Right.
thing is we'll take away your food and shelter.
Unless
your family,
you give us, unless you become a double diamond subscriber,
Yeah.
where we're going to fight and we're going to build a university, and we're going to train lawyers, and it's always about the fight. And that's something that I think liberals, myself included, are always really bad at, because I don't contextualize like that. I've started to. This era has kind of forced me to start to do that.
Yeah.
But that's the 20, 30, 40-year head start that they've been engaging with the media on, is that unless you do this, unless you fund our organizations, civilization is going to crumble and your family is going to die, and they're going to put you in FEMA camps. Remember the FEMA camps?
Sure.
Yeah, that's a real thing that people believe, that the Federal Emergency Management Agency that helps people during tornadoes and flash floods is actually going to round you all up and put you into concentration
Well, I will
camps
say
for not
it
voting for
wasn't
Obama.
the right-wing media that made me scared of that. It was the original X-Files movie. Remember?
I do remember.
They were
that.
like, "It's FEMA, Mulder. It's FEMA. They're gonna." And I was
was
like,
that Martin Landau?
Martin Landau.
Yeah, he was really good in that.
He's super good in that. My sister worked at Gutman Agency. Shout out to Martin Landau. Rest in peace. He was really cool, and he's always really nice to my sister, and she loved him to death because he was not only a really nice person but talented. And remember that MTV thing where he?
But I mean, with the FEMA camp thing, that was Chris Carter. I mean, he's still around. We can
Oh, shout out to Chris Carter.
shout out to Chris
yeah,
Carter.
why not?
He made you afraid of FEMA camps. Dude.
No, it's a movie. But I was smart enough even
But you
at that age
but
to
you
go.
understand the difference between a movie and reality. A lot
is
of people
true.
don't have those foundational
So you're
skills.
saying it starts at the foundation of just education unto itself to make people. I just think it boils down to you got to have more Harry Potter style books where people actually get excited about book launches. Because if we get people to read, it engages their brains in a way that's not mind-numbing TV. I also think shout out to Amazon. They have something for kids called Kindle Free Time Unlimited, where
Nice.
and you can actually set, so you don't have to be bad cop. You can set. We should be sponsored by them at this point. Maybe we can't transition from FEMA
Every
to an
single
Amazon
episode
sponsor.
is an Amazon thing.
Yeah, well, it's
Amazon and Four Loko.
It's totally right. But you can actually set the amount of hours your kid can consume,
Right.
both games, movies, music, etc. And then it's like it's done, and then you wean them off and say, "Go read a book, go play outside." Because
Where are they going to read a book if you limited their Kindle time?
bro, don't make me come at you, bro.
All right.
I don't know. That's for them to solve. I'm not Amazon. But I get concerned that, you obviously are very smart. You're working in this field. We're kind of in our own echo chamber where we surround ourselves with fellow smart people. What do we do to use your database to merge it into mainstream availability? Because you currently have a website, right? If someone goes and they want to see a new museum exhibit, they can go where?
So I've been working through my own Facebook page,
Cool.
FATIC. So it's Francesca Albrezzi Digital Arts Consulting .360. So FATIC.360.
Cool.
And that's where I've been posting a lot of my content. But I would love to encourage people to start building a database. I think that's going to be a needed thing, right?
Yeah.
It's a necessary.
Well, especially if you have the resources to validate things that are real.
And this is also for people to get involved if they're not involved in higher education or academia.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So they can reach out to you on Facebook and actually ask some questions and be like, "Hey, I got
Please
a
do.
treasure trove of. I'll give you some content."
I if I'll start the database tomorrow. Like,
Great.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic because I think that's the kind of thing that museums aren't thinking about collecting right now, and will be part of the collection process in the future.
Oh, imagine this! Like the year is 2040, and the Third Great War has done, and we're all.
That's a really short time span for the.
No,
I'm
come on.
not comfortable with that.
Nah, it's
I've
fine.
listened to too much X-1.
That's right. And then I want to see what Chicago looked like.
Right.
30, 40 years ago, and then there's all these videos, but potentially what's going to happen, and this is going to happen, if you create a repository today, people will give you their content, and you can have it as a legacy project, but I personally have hard drives that I consistently look at and go, I should probably format that. What's on that? I don't need that.
Yeah,
But potentially a museum would want that 20 minutes in the heart of Paris in 2014.
for sure.
Because imagine if we had 1914 in 360. How great would that be? I mean, look at those. I'll tell you, look at the Lumiere brother, Arrival of a Train. We still look at that as like the greatest thing that ever happened to film in that era. Well, I don't know. There's a lot of people deleting stuff.
The woman that I work with now on this NEH grant, Lisa Snyder, she's responsible for recreating a 3D model of the Chicago's World Fair.
The one where the guy killed everybody?
With the what?
Devil in the White City?
Yes, Devil in the White City.
Cool.
There you go.
There's a tour. You can go on a jogging tour for Devil in the White City.
Wow.
Yeah.
I had no idea.
Leonardo DiCaprio's supposed to star in the film.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. Well, so she created this academic 3D model that she's been doing for over a decade, meticulously rendering.
When will it be done?
Each building. It will probably never be done because it was so huge.
But you should work with like Warner Brothers on the launch of the film and do their VR experience where you can float around the World's Fair.
Well, and this is where I think there's a really interesting tension between entertainment and academics, right? That needs to be broken down because in this day and age, we want our students to be smart and we want them to have fun. Why can't they be doing the same thing at the same time? Like, it just doesn't...
And I think there's a certain level of, like, the Googles of the world are saying we need more people in the humanities. Like, we have enough business folk. The finance department is fully stocked.
We need people thinking about the ethics of it,
Yeah.
the anthropological side of it.
And the data scientists of the world, you can either be heavy on the engineer side, a mix between the humanities and engineer, or the humanities side to say, synthesize the data.
Yeah.
What does this mean, and where is the trajectory going?
Well, this conversation kind of trailed off. Not the one here, but the conversation about ethics in engineering, because it was very, very, very top of the mind back in 2007, 2008. During the economic collapse, based on all these software engineers who had developed the algorithms for how to split up and recategorize these toxic assets. And, that was the question, was what are we teaching software designers about what is ethical to create and why they should create it?
Yeah.
And I think there was an article in the New York Times about one of the people who created these algorithms, and he was absolutely horribly apologetic. But, as things improve, as there tends to be a human nature too, we forgot about it, and now we need to kind of reapproach. I think we're in that short-term memory is what leads to, fake news, right? It's like we have to find a way to keep this top of the mind with people. It has to be impressed upon us as a society.
Yeah. I also, I don't know where my stance is with regards to the infrastructure of society itself, capitalism, socialism, all these little programs. I don't have an opinion as of yet. It's still formulating. But I do think that we need to listen to the smartest minds, not just the loudest political minds, but the smartest minds saying, hey, automation's coming. And it's coming for almost every job. Creativity is a job unto itself, and even during the Depression, movies were in a boom mode, so fine. Yeah. But everybody else is potentially going to be put out of a job. And we go, no, there'll be other jobs. Solar is a big boom. Okay, the moment I can automate that and make it cheaper, McDonald's now has kiosks where I can press a button and the conveyor belt just hands me my burger. Okay, so we're losing these jobs. Where does the humanities has to come in and say, what's the moral context? Because there's a certain level of hunter-gatherer in all of us, both men and women, that we both want to strive and achieve and bring home whatever the version of a paycheck's been in our 6 million year history. But if we lose that and we still have the system of scarcity provides competition, we're eventually going to put ourselves in a place where all these people that voted for a guy that said, I'm going to get you your jobs back, you're going back in the mines.
Right.
That's going to be a mission statement for everybody forever, because we're never actually going to solve the real problem here, which is capitalism got us really, really far.
And can we take a really quick side trip to how horrible a situation we're in, where people get up and cheer and clap when somebody says, we're going to put you back in the coal mine? Okay, this isn't me being elitist about this. This is me growing up, and look, when I was a kid, we used to go and look at different kinds of mines and stuff, and in the old in the old West, we'd take trips, and you would learn about black lung, and you'd learn about devices called the Widowmaker that they used to use, and you'd sit there and go, yeah, wow, mining, that's awful. And to think about how broken we are as a society, where people are jumping up and down, going, yeah, put me back in the coal mine. we're not presenting good options
Rather
for
than
these people.
teach
right?
me how to code so I can
Exactly.
do that instead.
That's
Yeah.
right.
So the ontological argument that I'm making in my dissertation has to do with really the nature of being and how I think it's shifting the way that we saw a shift. If you've ever read Walter Ong's Literacy and Orality, it talks about the shift from oral culture to illiterate culture, and the way that we fundamentally changed as human beings with the introduction of writing as a technology. And I think in some ways we're facing a very similar shift in how we're going to be as humans in the world. So, for example, Sherry Turkle's latest book, Reclaiming Conversation, makes this argument and cites a social study that says, I think in the last couple of years in freshmen in college, empathy has dropped by 40%, right? This is a generation that's coming up that doesn't have the ability to relate to one another. They don't know how to do eye contact. They don't know how to stay in a conversation longer than 10 minutes without checking their device. And yet they're communicating in very different ways. And we're having machines like VR that are giving us immersive experiences and allowing us to kind of really, really walk in someone else's shoes.
Is there a VR experience called eye contact practice?
Eye contact practice?
Where it's like, there?
I'm really bad at that. Like,
Me too.
Yeah.
Is it, well, public speaking, but is there like one where someone's right near your face and you just have to like stare at them to be like, okay. Because I'm bad at eye contact, but
firm handshake simulator.
Just your pillow. grip it tighter, Johnson. No, I don't. That's like I think a character name I made up in my head out of nowhere. Sorry.
Don't apologize.
I'm sorry.
Own it, Chadwick.
I'm owning it. No, eye contact, like these kind of things that I think potentially help. So they say this, but books annoy the crap out of me unless there's a proposal of how to solve it. So did she propose potentially how we can fix this, or is it just like, it sucks, but I don't? Peace.
So her argument is, or her suggestion is, she's not anti-technology, she's pro-conversation.
Cool.
So her encouragement is like,
so there is a
do your digital, because she was she wrote The Second Self back in the early in 1987, I believe, and she was one of the first people on the scene with personal computers and hackers and understanding, hey, how are you guys using this in your daily life? And isn't that great? And how it's changing us in wonderful ways. But now seeing the other side of that, she's more reticent about how much we should be incorporating it into our life on a daily basis, right? We should be limiting it. Now, for me, I totally understand and stand behind that argument and think that that's a great thing to encourage here and now. I'm looking long-term scale. We're done for. Like, it's never going to go back.
Right.
It's not possible.
Wait for the implants.
Yeah.
I mean, there are contact lenses with screens on them, and so LASIK is nothing more than putting a permanent contact on your eye. So Black Mirror is not a TV show. It is a fortune-telling device that you can, if you are aware of the technology enough, you see the steps of 10 to 15 years how we can get to any of those things.
Well, but I will say this. So the artist Zenka put together with Upload LA.
Jenny Zenka?
Yeah.
Heck yeah. Shout out to Jenny Zenka. Her portraits and sculptures are incredible.
Fantastic. Yeah. And her TED Talk was phenomenal and really influenced the way that I think, because
I need to give you, I filmed in 360 in 2014 her first demo in an art gallery in East LA of all of her faces.
I would love to see that. Oh,
Sorry,
really
continue, but yes, I love Jenny Zenka.
She's fantastic. And she did an actual event, or helped organize an event at Upload LA that was white mirror. So it was, how do we,
that's cool,
rather than have a dystopic view of the future and feel like, oh, all is lost and we're all going to just end up cyborgs, how do we think about what would we want that technological world to be as a utopic world? What are the benefits? How can we tell a story where it's a positive view of technology integration? And I think that's where the responsibility comes in. how are we shaping these technologies and their uses and their adoption into academics and into cultural spheres, huge cultural organizations and institutions that are being responsible and changing for the better rather than, encouraging us to spread more fake news.
I don't know. I say that I agree with you. I 100% agree that these institutions need to do it. The problem is there's such a profit motive everywhere, whether it's foundations that need to raise capital. And I think that what you said earlier about you need to have an MO to consume this stuff. And so in my head, that means it needs to be fun. So you need to create
there are ways to create it that doesn't necessarily have to be fun.
Engaging.
Right? Like
engaging, okay.
Engaging is another word for it, but there's nothing fun about the belief that everybody who joins the military is a hero. It's just a widespread thing in our society that we perpetuate, just going, well, he joined the army, he's a hero, let's have a parade. That's deeply, firmly embedded in our society as a core value at that point. So dropping additional core values in that respect accurate journalism and things of that nature.
Got it.
Those are going to be a much more difficult process because we haven't started it. It doesn't have a real benefit to people who want to manipulate us, and for better or for worse, sometimes for our own good, sometimes to our detriment. Governmental institutions and large companies do like to be able to manipulate us. So when you start to try to create a cultural currency where accuracy is rewarded, you are going to face opposition to it.
Well, I think it has to do with where is the moral fiber coming from, right? If it's not coming from religious institutions anymore, if we're becoming more and more of a secular society, and if it's not the nation state, right? If it's not for God and for country, then it's coming from where?
That's a question that we need to I need to have an answer before I leave. What the heck?
Where do you get your morality, Chadwick?
I don't know. I think we talked about this at one point.
No, this is one of these things that Michael Medved and all these, Dennis Prager and all these conservatives.
No, we talked about it also on our buddy from 2 times ago. What was this? He talked about the occult. Yeah. But he talked about and I talked about
Ryan Betchart.
Yeah, you had moral compasses that religion provided you, and then we made the joke where I was like, well, should I kill this person? Wait, let me check the list. No, can't. Number 4, can't kill him. But now that we're like, well, I'm not religious.
Well, it has to materially benefit you, right? I mean, all those things materially benefit you. If you murder frankly, anybody, but there are certain things that you have been traditionally condone murder and things that are taboo murder, right? Like you can't murder your brother, but you can, definitely murder, someone from another culture who's invading your culture. Those sort of religious rules.
Yeah.
There has to be material benefit.
And Rand.
Yeah. It's like what are we going to create that's a benefit? You're going to be the biggest fear is ostracized, right? Like your children are going to flee and not take care of you when you're in advanced age, if you keep on harping on them about fake news. And those are the kinds of things that create those moralistic conditions.
So why is someone not an institution or just a band of scientists? I always hear I'm an independent. Okay, the third party in this country is the independent party, right? And so the independent party should be the secular party. You can be religious, but this is the belief system. Be the golden rule. We should help people. Healthcare is a good thing. It's a right. All of these things that collectively people are in agreement on underneath this band.
Entangling morality with political parties is also very problematic.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, good point.
Just throwing that out.
Foundation. And then world domination.
But we were the right party. That's right. How we are now, right?
Yeah,
it's a moral imperative not to vote for this person, right? So it closes you off to new ideas.
Yeah. Well, so to wrap it up, why don't you remind people where they can find you? And reminder, if you guys have content out there that you don't know necessarily what to do with, and you think archival worthy, be sure to reach out. You can reach out to us on The Future is Virtual. We can connect you to Francesca as well. I truly believe that this is something that is of the utmost importance. It's super cool, and I think that it's like a time capsule where, if we capture enough of this, I don't want to consume it now, but 20 years from now, I'm the only friend I know that has about 13 of my trips with my wife fully documented in 360 degrees, and I'm talking hours of
Chadwick,
footage.
nobody likes a bragger. Nobody likes
What's up,
swearing.
guys? Follow me at VR Chadwick. Dekker, where can they find you? And then we'll let
Find me at Dekker Dreyer on Instagram, Movie Cult on Facebook, and find both of us at thefuturesvirtual.com, #TFIV.
That's right.
And The Futures Virtual on Facebook.
And Francesca, where can they find you?
And they can find me on Instagram at Francesca.Albrezzi, on Twitter at FALBREZZI, that's F. Albrezzi, and then on Facebook at Fatic.360.
Cool.
I hope you all followed along with that.
Yeah. What episode? What are we going to title this one? The Future is Art? We'll have to figure this out.
You're putting me on the spot, man.
Come on, Dekker.
Look, I'm not that good.
He's
That's
not
why
that good. All right.
That's why I knocked
We
you down
always
at the
try to-
beginning.
The
I'm just not
future
that
is
good.
preserved.
Boom! The future is preserved. I love it. All right, thanks, guys. Thanks for listening. The Future is Virtual.